All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about CPCTC proofs. Throwback to CPCTC. What does CPCTC mean? CPCTC means corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So if I have two congruent triangles, that means I have two congruent parts. If we're talking about the corresponding angles, that means I have two congruent corresponding sides. I've got all the different pairs of angles and sides that we have. So if we have these two triangles that are congruent, then I know this side is congruent to this side is congruent to this side because they're corresponding. This side's congruent to this side because it's corresponding. And same thing with the angles. This one's congruent to this one. This top one's congruent to this one. This bottom one's congruent to this one. All right, so that's what CPCTC means. Given the following, let's prove line segment AC is congruent to line segment PR. We have never proved anything like this before. What we have proved in general, what we have proved over the last couple of months are different algebraic properties. We have proved different statements, and over the last unit, we have proved congruent triangles. So now we're going to prove that we have line segment AC is congruent to PR, but first, in order to prove this, I need to prove these two triangles are congruent. So right over here, we're going to say, in order to prove corresponding parts are congruent, you first must prove the triangles are congruent. Okay, so that's important to know. So let's prove these two triangles are congruent. Again, with our colors that we know, we can go ahead and grab my colors. I know that this right here is congruent to, and if we think about just flipping this triangle over completely, angle C is going to be congruent to angle R. I also know that line CB is congruent to line QR. And my last thing that I know is that my angle B is congruent to my angle Q. All right, so let's write this stuff down. What do we think that we're being proved by here? We have angle, side, angle. So we're being proved by angle, side, angle. So we can say P, triangle ACB is congruent to, starting to prove that they're congruent. Let's go back to what we actually are trying to do. We're trying to prove that these guys are congruent. My mistake. Come down here, AC is congruent to PR. In order to prove this, I've got to prove that these two are congruent too. So my evidence. I know that angle ACB is congruent to angle ACB is congruent to PRQ. And this was just given to me. And that was my first angle. My second side is CB is congruent to CB, so the corresponding angle to C is R, so RQ. And that's just given to me. Okay. My last one, I'm proving my angle side angle, so my angle that's congruent is CBA. Angle CBA is congruent to angle RQP. So I can't close this proof out yet because remember I'm not proving the two triangles are congruent. I'm proving that my two side lengths are congruent. So after I've said that this is, I can in conclusion say that my two triangles are congruent. But in order to prove my top part, I can't say my two triangles are congruent as my analysis. I can only put it as part of my evidence. So these two are congruent by angle, side, angle congruence. So because of this, if I know that I have two congruent sides, I can say that I have all corresponding parts are congruent. So I can say AC is congruent to PR by CPCTC. Okay. All right, I would like you to write in your notes, what does it mean to prove by CPCTC yourselves? What does it mean to prove by CPCTC? This is just something in your own kind of words. If it was me writing this, I would say, first, I need to identify what I'm trying to prove. So that was this guy. Then I would say the bulk of my proof is going to be proving that my triangle is congruent, so that for my analysis, I can prove that my two parts are congruent. Please put this in your own words and then come back and do some more proofs. All right, here's our next proof. We're trying to prove angle C is congruent to angle F. So P, angle C is congruent to angle F. Make sure you write down your P, what you're trying to prove first, so you don't do the silly little mistake that I started to do up at the top. So P is angle C is congruent to angle F. Well, I don't know that. It's not given to me. So let's identify our corresponding congruent parts. I know that AB is congruent to DE. It also tells me this angle right here is congruent to this angle right here. And my last thing it tells me is AC is congruent to DF. So when I read this in order, starting it here, I can say side, angle, side. So I'm proving these guys by side, angle, side. And let's write them down. My first side is BA is congruent to ED by given. My angle that's sandwiched between my two sides is angle BAC. That is congruent to angle EDF. That's given to me. And my last side is AC is congruent to DF, and that is also given to me. So remember again, our proof we're trying to prove is not that two triangles are congruent. It is that we have two corresponding parts that are congruent. So I need an extra line in here saying triangle BAC is indeed congruent to triangle EDF by side angle side congruence. And then, oh, that was my evidence. Now I can say for my analysis, angle C is congruent to angle F by CPCTC. We know that's true because we just proved that these two sides are congruent. These two sides are congruent, these two sides are congruent, these two angles are congruent, which gives me congruent triangles by side angle side. All right, one last proof, and then we will see each other in class. Go to this proof. Prove angle A is congruent to angle E. My first step, always write my angle A is congruent to angle E. Beautiful. Let's now copy down what we know. So highlight BC is congruent to DC. Okay. We can also highlight that AC is congruent to CE. Those are everything that was given to me. What is not given to me? What's not given to me is that this angle is congruent to this angle by vertical angles. So let's write down my analysis, my evidence, so that I can write down my analysis. What do I know here? Am I proving it by side, 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 HL, angle, angle, side, angle, side, and angle, side, angle? Which one am I proving it by? Proving it by side, angle, side. So side, angle, side. My side is BD is congruent to BD is congruent to DC. BC is congruent to DC. BC is congruent to DC. My angle BCA, angle BCA is congruent to angle DCE. And my last side, AC, is congruent to EC. Okay, run through this one more time. BC is congruent to DC. Why? Because it was given. BCA is congruent to DCE. That wasn't given to me. That was by vertical angles. And then AC is congruent to EC. That's given to me. Again, my analysis is not that these are congruent triangles. My analysis would be that this is true. So my next step is triangle BCA is congruent to triangle DCE by side angle side congruence. So to top my proof off, I can say angle A is congruent to angle E by CPCTC. All right, see you in class.